Kind of hot today. So the Hawks. The cap's supposed to go up next year. Now, of course, Cap Friendly is still going on a $73 million cap going into next season. The Hawks are above $77 million right now. Chicago needs to make moves. Now, this is where things get interesting. Because, of course, Kruger's name gets thrown out as the most likely guy to get drafted by Vegas. Now, Kruger's probably not the guy that is going to be wanted by Vegas. So, we're looking at a situation where Stan Bowman's probably going to have to sweeten the pot before George McPhee takes the guy. Kane and Taves, man, that $20 million. And I said it after they got eliminated. I said if Chicago really wants cap flexibility, a couple of these big price guys got to go. And if you have a good GM, and Bowman's been a very good GM for Chicago, you have to take a chance at trading out big guys. You look at the teams in the 80s like the Oilers and even to some extent the Penguins in the 90s, and you have to be able to make those big deals to stay relevant, stay at the top. Now, you throw the salary cap into it. The Oilers didn't have to worry about it. The Penguins in the early 90s didn't have to worry about it. The salary cap makes it a lot more difficult. Because now I'm talking about, okay, you got these guys who are worth big money, and there's a lot of teams that are not looking at the kind of cap room that they might want to be if they pick one of these guys up. The Hawks are over this mark, and teams know they're over it. And, you know, you can put a couple guys on LTIR if you want, and it's funny because, you know, the number one name that gets mentioned the most, I'm going to go ahead and scroll up here. The number one name that gets mentioned the most is Hossa. And people who defend Hossa say, well, he's only making $1 million. So there's no reason to get rid of Hossa. His salary is only $1 million. His salary doesn't enter into the problem. His cap hit of $5.275 million is an issue. He's 38. He's got 4 years left on this deal. $5.275 million if they get rid of that. So let's say Kruger goes to Vegas, and if they find a taker for Hossa, they're not over the cap anymore. Hossa's a good player. I'm not saying he's not. That's why he's potentially tradable. Teams are funny when it comes to the salary cap. The cap teams, the guys like Chicago's, the used to be with the Detroits too, and now with Pittsburgh, you get to that cap, and you tend to stay there. As long as there's success, you tend to stay there. So rebuilding teams are usually able to pull themselves away because they go, all right, this big ticket guy, we could bring him in, but while we have the cap space, we don't necessarily have a winning roster right now, so we're going to save that money. That's sometimes the smartest move. I look at last summer, a Vancouver Canucks team that desperately needs to rebuild goes out and gets Louis Eriksson, and now they're tied to that cap for 2 more years. God, I hope it's 2 more years. Isn't it 2 more years? I don't even want to look. I'm scared. But for the Canucks to go out and make that move has left them with this $6 million weight now when it comes to the cap. When I get to the Canucks, we'll see that. But for the Hawks, they're way past that point. And when you look down this list, and I'm just going to go through the forwards here. You've got Kane and Taves. They're in their prime. Panarin's in his prime. Anisimov, same. Panik, absolutely. He seems to love it in Chicago and vice versa. Hayden is a young kid. Schmaltz is young. Hartman's young. Kiro's young. Hinostroza is workable and manageable under the cap. 2-2 is signed for next year. He may be a guy that they dangle as unprotected with the idea that maybe with $700,000 cap hit, Vegas takes a shot at him. You've got Yurko as an RFA. Rasmussen as an RFA. They can both be signed for lower money. You've got a lot of players there. You get rid of Kruger and you find a taker for Hossa, you've got cap space. And you've got Tyler Mott waiting to come in and take a full-time job. And DeBrincat. I think, honestly, DeBrincat, as soon as this coming fall, is going to be pushing for a job in the NHL. I think he's that good. On the blue line, there's an issue. You got Seabrook, Keith, Hjalmarsson, Kempny, Forsling, Van Riemsdyk, and Rozovol, all signed coming back next year. Forsling may become a top 4 defenseman. Kempny has shown potential to be a top 4 defenseman. Van Riemsdyk likely is a top 4 defenseman. It's an expensive defense. That's why Hawks fans are like, well, we can get rid of Seabrook. The defense kind of gets thin. You look at where Nashville is right now, and those top 4, that's partly how they're there and how they're in the Cup final. If the Hawks trade out Seabrook, and I'm all for it if they can get a defenseman back, well, that's the issue. Now they're telling a team, hey, for cap reasons, can we maybe, I don't know, you take Seabrook and we take whoever on an ELC. Team's going to say, you got to make it smarter than that. You got to give us something more. You got to give us some reason to help you. Because, and I've had this debate before too, it is not the job of the other 30 GMs in the NHL to help Chicago out of trouble. And knowing Chicago's out of trouble means you can probably squeeze a little more out of them than you could otherwise. Where you can look at a Kruger and say, he's a pretty good player, but you guys desperately need to unload him. Hossa, yeah, he can still perform, but he's 38. He's gonna start to dive in terms of his production. And that $5+ million cap hit is there for 4 more years. That's a lot of money. You got to make it worth it to us. So, I look at the board. Chicago's drafting 26th overall. That draft pick may have to go out for them to get under the cap. Now, I'm going to get into goaltending here. So you've got Crawford and Glass draws in right now as their backup goaltender. And there isn't really a guy in the minors who's busting through and saying, hey, I'm the next big deal here. Chicago's got a problem. In order to get to the conversation about how they get a guy who can back up Crawford and play 25 to 30 games, because I don't know that Glass is the answer for that, you have to fix the cap first. There are plenty of good goaltenders that are going to be able to be had this summer. The Hawks can't touch them, any of them, until they fix the cap problem they have. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. They've got to figure out a way to get Vegas to take Kruger. They're not going to take Hossa. There's no way Vegas is touching Hossa. Expansion team or not, there's no way. And the other issue that they're going to have, and I'm going to say this, I know Chicago fans are already going to be talking about it. Modified no trade clause for Kruger. No movement clause for Anisimov. No movement clause for Hossa. No movement clause for Taves. No movement clause for Kane. No movement clause for Seabrook. No movement clause for Keith. Modified no trade and no movement clause for Hjalmarsson. The Hawks are in deep. They can't even put this lineup on the ice. People have to go on LTIR. One of these big ticket guys has to go on LTIR if they don't move enough salary out. Chicago got swept in the first round. Chicago has problems. They definitely have problems. It's the second year in a row they've got eliminated in the first round. They have to address those problems. And their biggest problem is the cap. Look at it this way. If you're a Chicago fan and you're watching this, I like what Chicago's done. I was a Chicago hater in 2010, and by the time 2016 rolled around, I was like, you know what? This is probably as close to a dynasty as we're going to get. Does it officially qualify? No. But it's probably about as close to a dynasty as we're going to get. Now, Pittsburgh, these guys look like they're ready to challenge my claim on that. Next year's hockey yearbook may have Sidney Crosby holding up the cup again. But for Chicago to get back and to prove that they're capable, they have to fix this first. And it's got to be big ticket guys. You can't nickel and dime your way out of this one. That's why it's so weird that they re-signed Panik for $2.8 million a year for 2 years. Good contract. Very good for Panik. Fantastic. Strange. Very strange move. All right. So what I need is, for Chicago fans, let me know what you think. Who gets moved out? Like, for me, it's, Kruger, maybe Hossa. And again, I know Hossa has a $1 million salary. That's not the problem. That's a selling point for another team. It's the $5+ million cap hit that kills the Hawks, puts them over the cap, and they're going to have to trade young guys worth $5 million to offset the cap or just move Hossa. Because at the minimum, if the cap goes up to $76 million, they're $1.5 million above it. And then, of course, you're a Hawks fan, you're going, okay, well, then they just move out Kruger and they're below the cap. Yeah, and then you have the exact same roster you had last year. You have the exact same roster you had, which failed to win a game in the playoffs. And your goaltending takes a hit because instead of Darling being your backup, you have Glass. And if you take $76 million for a cap hit and you take off Kruger, you're taking off about $3 million. You've got about $2 million to sign a backup goaltender. Fine. You have no money to fix anything else on this roster or improve anything. Is that good enough? Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. And thank you so much for watching. It's a big weekend. Oh, and somebody mentioned they saw my hair in a video earlier. Yeah, so I had to get rid of that. I just had to get rid of it. All right, thanks for watching. I'll talk to you all again soon.